Welcome to the Blue Security Podcast, a weekly podcast for information security defenders, where we bring you discussions on best practices, tools, and implementation for enterprise security. Now, here are your hosts for today's show, Andy Jha and Adam Brewer.
Welcome to this week's episode of the Blue Security Podcast. I'm Andy, your host.
I'm Adam, your co-host.
So we have our emails and contact information in the show notes every week, and sometimes we get questions that come up, as well as, Adam and I do work for Microsoft in our security sales business. Microsoft is not a sponsor of this show. We put it on our own time, but often we'll get different questions from customers as well that I'm like, hey, this would make a great podcast topic. And so today, what I wanted to talk about is training. So oftentimes we'll get a question on where do I get more training for Microsoft stuff? And we'll touch on some of the other things in IT as well, but specifically around Microsoft. The bulk of our training, especially when it comes to written documentation, is in the Learn Microsoft portal. So it's learn.microsoft.com. There is training for everything, every solution, every topic. There's basic training to advanced training to a lot of times there's deployment walkthroughs as well as best practices. We have several Learn documents on best practices for securing privileged identity, deploying Intune, so on and so forth. And we have certification tracks for different certifications for Microsoft. So if you're looking through it, you may see the SC-100 or SC-400, so on and so forth. Those are usually the security certifications. We also have ones for Azure, which are AZ-so on and so forth. And then there's general Microsoft ones like MS, like MS-102, which is our desktop management administrator. And then there's other ones, Dynamics, AI, application development, so on and so forth. So if you need documentation on what something is, how it works, how to deploy it, best practices, all of that is documented in the learn.microsoft.com. And that is by far the most official and the majority of our learning. And we have specific people, technical writers that we hire to write all of the things within the Learn documentation.
Yeah, the Learn site, compared to every other vendor out there, so many vendors nowadays hide a lot of their documentation behind a paywall in their support site. Microsoft's is out in the open. It's public material to anyone. No login even required, just out there on the public internet, which also means you can hit it with search engines, which is nice, compared to, again, behind a paywall and you have to use their provided search for it. It's not just documentation, to Andy's point, although that is the bulk of what's there. As you review documentation, you'll discover there are entire bits of what look like documentation that are actually guidance, best practices, recommendations, tutorials, all sorts of related material helping you get started, get going, or understand how to architect or build a system out or build a process out. So there's a ton here. Don't be dismissive of it as it's just technical documentation. It's much bigger than that. Also, Andy touched on all the formal certification tracks through Microsoft. On all of that material, so you could go look up a specific certification. There are learning tracks for those certifications that are also hosted on the Learn site, and they will prepare you for the exam. Again, exam prep at no cost. It's included. It's just on the site for anyone to go access. So one of the themes you're going to hear throughout this podcast is that you will get out of training for Microsoft solutions pretty much what you put into it. If you are motivated to learn it, the material, the opportunities, they're all there. And so much of it is no cost, publicly accessible, available to anyone. And so those learning tracks are great too. I know I used several of them to prepare for some of the formal certifications I hold. I hold 10 different Microsoft certifications. So I've been around the block on how do you prepare for them? How do you study for them? How do you maintain them? And so much of that material is on the Learn site today. So cannot emphasize enough that should be your first stop. For anything you want to learn, go there, review the material first. And if there are gaps from there, we'll go through some other options as well. But certainly the first and most definitive stop for anything you want to learn.
Another reason to get familiar with the Learn site, especially if you're going for certifications, is as of now, when you go and take an official Microsoft certification, whether it's remote or at a testing site, you get access to the Learn site. So as part of your certification, you can bring up a separate window and literally have all of learn.microsoft.com at your fingertips. It's an open book test, but you only get access to the Learn site. And so get familiar with it. If you're going in for a certification, you get access to it. So you need to be up on your search foo, if you know what I mean. You got to be able to know what you're looking for on the Learn site.
That is a useful skill. I didn't know our exams had gone open book. I knew our renewals had, for sure. The renewals are, because you don't even need to go into like a testing system or anything to do a renewal now.
The renewals are completely like you get the internet, right?
Yeah.
Like you're not even locked down, but
you're not locked down. Yeah.
In the certification, you get access to the learn.microsoft.com site.
Wow. I learned something today. But yes, knowing how to navigate the site is a useful skill, because there is kind of a common framework for how the documentation is built out, the sections it tends to have, the way it's written, and the way it flows. So learning how to navigate documentation is a useful skill in and of itself.
All right. The next thing that I would highly recommend if you're looking for training is something called the Ninja training. Now, this has been out there for a while, and we have added to it quite a bit. They're usually done by the communities for each different segment, and they're mainly around security and compliance. And so what I'll put in the show notes is a link to Rod Trent's Substack, where he lists out all of the different Ninja trainings that are out there that we know of today. And all of them have like specific focuses. For example, there's one for Copilot for security, Defender vulnerability management, XDR, Sentinel, a specific one for Defender for endpoint, e-discovery, DLP, insider risk, so on and so forth. So these are very focused, and what they do is they aggregate a lot of things. Sometimes there'll be third-party YouTube videos or blogs. In the Defender for endpoint, they talk about just endpoint security in general. So there's basic, intermediate, and advanced sections, and each section will go through specifically, like for example, on the Sentinel one, on the advanced one, you're going to do more KQL advanced searches into the logs, and that's not something that beginners would do. And so this is a extreme comprehensive training for a very specific thing that you want to get better at. Now, in the basic portions of most of them, they usually are fairly general. They'll kind of go over, like, for example, like what is purview and what is information protection concepts. And then it goes into more deeper dives on the solution itself. So highly recommend, if you're looking for something to get better at for security or compliance, the Ninja training is something that is really good. Now, one of the things that is really interesting that I think as I've been going through this, especially this year, my role at Microsoft involves being part of the advanced identity community. There are no Ninja trainings for Entra. And so that's something I'm actually going to bring up to our folks in our community and see if maybe we want to make something. But Entra is one of the things that I noticed is actually missing. There is a Defender for Identity Ninja, but that's a little bit different because, again, it's more security focused. So everything from security on the Defender side, a SIM, Copilot, and then Purview and Priva are all in here. I would say for Entra, Learn documentation is probably still the best track to go for that.
Yeah, Ninja training I would describe as more product focused versus some of the other formal certifications are more concept focused or kind of in a specific discipline or area as opposed to one technology. In fact, a lot of what gets asked on formal certifications will be the intersection of how do I use these two tools together to accomplish a desired result versus Ninja training is very focused on an individual solution for each training. So if you want to become an expert on just Defender for Endpoint, all up, Ninja Training is going to be the where to go for that kind of thing. It's really good. The Ninja Training is especially for people who want to go really deep technically on one specific solution. You're the kind of person who likes to take stuff apart and see how it works. You're going to like the Ninja Training a lot more in that sense, because it's going to tickle that part of your brain in terms of helping you understand not just the what it does, but how it does it. And it's really good at that. So Ninja Training, level 400, product specific training, and really, really well done. And Andy mentioned, through the communities, but still definitely vetted and approved by product groups for each product. In fact, they're the ones who actually publish it on their specific tech community blog. And the link we'll put in the show notes is to Rod Trent's Substack, as Andy mentioned, but Rod does work for Microsoft. It's just a way to collect all of the links into a single blog.
The next thing I would recommend for someone who's trying to learn more is the Microsoft Mechanics YouTube channel. I love the Microsoft Mechanics YouTube channel because they're short, bite-sized videos on almost anything Microsoft. So if you look on their channel, you can find almost anything that you want to learn about, and it'll feed it to you with about a 5 to 10 minute video. Sometimes it's new features that are coming out. Sometimes it's how-to videos. Sometimes it's just general knowledge on a specific thing, like Azure. For example, when I was looking at the Microsoft Mechanics video for this show, when I was making the show notes actually a little while ago, I learned that GPU-enabled M360 or Windows 365 machines went general availability and they're out. I know that when I was in that space, that was something that a lot of customers were asking for. We hadn't had it yet. We had announced that it was on the roadmap, but from the Microsoft Mechanics video, it was one of the newest ones that was there, and I watched it, and it's like 5-10 minutes or something, and I learned that, hey, this is something that is out today. So really good channel to follow, to try to keep up on kind of all things Microsoft, but they also have a great backlog of videos that you can go back and watch.
Yeah, I love the Microsoft Mechanics channel on YouTube. Again, everything Andy said, they're short, they're bite-sized, they're to the point. They are technical, but not too technical, especially when introducing a new subject. So a great way to learn a lot about a variety of subjects in a short period of time. And then Microsoft does have pretty much a world-class production facility on campus in Redmond, multi-million-dollar production facility. So the production values of any video content made at Microsoft is always really, really high and really good. And Microsoft Mechanics is no exception. It's shot at the Microsoft production facility, and it's really well produced as well. So it won't be awkward or poorly edited or a waste of your time. It's tight and well produced, and so you'll enjoy that too.
Another good YouTube channel to follow is the official Microsoft security channel. This one is more from corporate and has a bunch of different types of videos. Usually they're more official. A lot of them aren't like live updates. They're more produced, but there are a few live stream videos on there on different topics. But this is more from corporate and still a really good channel to follow. I think a lot of the videos there are more 100 to 200 level. Not a lot of them are deep dives. And then there's the tech community or the security community YouTube channel. This one's organized right now by Heike Ritter. She's very well known in the Microsoft security community. She manages the tech community for security, and these are deep dives. So the at Microsoft Security Community YouTube channel has usually monthly calls that are recorded. I attend them because they're good for me even learning internally, and then they're hosted on our YouTube channel as well. These are deep dives from product group on upcoming features, or even just a little bit more about specific solutions. Like, for example, Defender for Containers. We did a show on that, but a lot of the information that I got from it was from our Learn documentation and from the deep dive of the product group folks who put on a call on Defender for Containers on that channel. So Really good for deep dives and new features. And then there's, of course, a tech community blog as well. So for security, compliance, and identity. And that's a great one to follow and read because our PGs and other MVPs will publish things to that site, which are all vetted. And even though it's community, and there's great discussion there. If you need to ask questions, there's good responses. So that's a great kind of organic security community within Microsoft.
The tech community blogs are the one thing, if you take away one thing from this show, that's your one go-do from this show. For whatever you cover, go follow the tech communities that are aligned to the products or solution areas that you do in your day-to-day job. You will not regret it. This is where every new feature gets announced first. New public previews get announced first. This is where the actual announcements of here's what's changing or coming to the product gets announced and explained in depth first. How many shows, Andy, have we done based off of blogs from the identity tech community and posts from some of the identity experts over there, the folks in our identity PG, because they don't just say, we're making this change, deal with it. They say, we're making this change and here's why. And then they'll do, honestly, 2 pages on here are the threats, here's what we're seeing, here's the data supporting our decision, here's why we're going to make this decision, here's the impacts, the positive impacts we expect as a result of it. So if you want to understand not just the what, but the why, they're phenomenal resources, truly the best conduit between customers and Microsoft, in my opinion, of if you want to just keep up on what is actually happening and coming, they are phenomenal resources.
And then finally, some thoughts around if you want to play around in a lab. This is something that I learned recently. In the Learn documentation, if you're looking at the certifications, there's something called applied skills. And Adam, I'm not sure if you know about this because I just found out about it. I mentor in a program called the Microsoft Systems and Software Academy, which is for veterans and people transitioning off of active duty military into a tech career. And they were telling me about this applied skills portion of Learn. And what it is essentially a lab for a specific thing, and it teaches you how to do it real time, not just in writing, but that it builds a lab and then you can like go and do it. So for example, there's things like configure SIM security operations using Microsoft Sentinel. And when you launch the applied skills, it gives you a walkthrough on actually how to do that with the Azure portal and everything, and walking you through it so that you know how to do it. And then some of it requires you to like actually repeat the skills to pass the training. And there's everything from security to like building distributed apps with .NET, or creating, managing Canvas apps with Power Apps, deploying cloud native apps using Azure Container applications, deploying and manage Microsoft Azure Arc enabled servers. So there's quite a few here. And I mean, that's just scratching the surface. But taking a look at the applied skills, I think if there's something that is here that is relevant to what you're trying to learn, it is a great way to learn within a lab and not have to worry about doing something within your production environment, and then also getting a badge once you pass that you've showed that you've actually learned and applied the skill within a lab environment. So great thing to try out there.
The applied skills are awesome. I actually did know about it, Andy, because I helped beta test them. So I was quite familiar. But yes, this is a great opportunity where, especially, let's say you don't do well with formal certifications. Like that whole format gives you anxiety, or you find it's too disconnected from your day-to-day work, and you'd like a way to show, hey, I know how to do this. Like when you get me hands-on in a portal and give me a directive, I can go accomplish it. Let me prove that, as opposed to quizzing me on random factoids about a system. Let me show I can actually deploy the system or whatever. So yeah, these are a great option, especially as either augmenting your formal certifications or instead of formal certifications, to show other ways you know how to do different applied skills. And also, yes, you can use it as a training mechanism as well. So another great opportunity as well. Yeah, I'm glad you called that out. I almost forgot about it. But yeah, I did help beta test one or two of them back in the day.
Yeah, and they're continually adding to them. In fact, just in the last month or two that I've checked, they've added a couple more, specifically around like implementing information protection labels and retention labels and so on and so forth. So it's phenomenal, and I was blown away when I found out about it. We also have free ISOs for operating systems in our evaluation center. So if you need to download Windows, 11 ISOs or server ISOs, you can get those. For the Windows ones are 90 days and the server ones are 180. They don't last forever, but at least you get the chance to play around in your own lab if you need ISOs for testing, as well as like if you need a virtual environment. Windows Pro at least or higher has Hyper-V built in. Another tool is VirtualBox. I used VirtualBox for years, and that's open source, and you can build your own lab within VirtualBox as well. If you're doing a test of Azure, you can sign up and get like something like $200 credits for free to use. It's the same with AWS. I know that I signed up for a trial with AWS and got some credits, and they do go away, but you can always like get another email and sign up for another trial. So that's a way to just get some credits for free. And then as far as like if you start going down the path of, hey, this is really an investment that I want to do and build an actual lab, just not like play around in it, you can start building things that can host your own VMs. I have a blog, and I'll toss it into the show notes, where I built a server that hosts something called Unraid, and I use that as my primary sandbox. And so I'll spin up VMs or spin them down, and I'll run different things like containers on it. And you can run Unraid on almost any type of hardware. I built a specific box for it, but you can run it on an old PC as well. The operating system for Unraid, I believe there's still a free version of it, or there's a lifetime license as well that's fairly inexpensive, and the operating system can run on a USB. So the operating system runs on a USB, and then it uses the underlying hardware as its hypervisor to host different things. So great operating system there. And then finally, the M365 developer tenant. A lot of SaaS solutions have developer tenants that you can get. M365 is no exception. And with that, you get certain licenses to things. For example, Entra will come with it, as well as Exchange and so on and so forth. One of the things you don't get with your developer tenant is Defender for Endpoint, but you do get Defender for Office, which is actually pretty cool. So you can test malicious emails against a sandbox, mailbox that you have. So test different rules, so on and so forth. So M365 developer tenant, a lot of great things about that. And then, I've used developer tenants for other SaaS solutions. If you want to hook into, for example, if you want to federate your developer tenant Entra with another solution just to get single sign-on and test that, you can get a developer tenant for Salesforce, for Okta, for Box, so on and so forth, and actually federate and test single sign-on without doing it within a production environment, which can be disruptive for your users. Anything identity related can be disruptive. So
Right.
Great way to test there.
Yeah, all great call outs as well. Again, kind of goes back to my point at the top of the show, which was you'll get out of it what you put into it. If you're really motivated to learn some of these things, there's so many resources available. And here's some more examples where, hey, you want to bang on a Windows OS, there's ISOs available on the evaluation center. You want to hypervise it, VirtualBox is free. You want a developer tenant to try a couple other weird configurations or see how this works or that works, knock yourself out. It's all out there for you. You just got to go kind of be willing to build it out and stitch it together, and some great opportunities to do your own learning in your own sandbox.
And then just in general, like, beyond Microsoft, but also around Microsoft, we have LinkedIn Learning, great site for all things. There's general security, general technical, general career learnings from there. Different podcasts. If you're listening to this, obviously, there's podcasts, but there's other ones out there, and blogs. each individual vendor and solution, like we mentioned at the top of the show, generally has their own documentation and training on their specific solution. AWS has a very good learning track as well as certifications that you can kind of do through that if you're learning about AWS, but each one has their own. Sometimes it is gated. You have to be a customer, you have to have a login. Microsoft and AWS's does not. So great from that standpoint. Another good source of information that I use is Reddit and Twitter. Really great spots for that. Twitter gives you a lot of like real-time reactions to things that are happening. And then one of the best things that I have been a part of in my career is just being able to network with coworkers and friends on certain things. Adam and I used to work together in a different organization when I first started at Microsoft, and we have a group of friends that are very technical coworkers that we use to work with, and we've kept a group chat going for several years now where we'll bounce things off of each other. Sometimes it's just about life in general, but a lot of times it's about things we're working on or different things that we're interested in and testing. We'll talk about phones, we'll talk about PCs, Macs, security. And it's great to have a circle of friends or old coworkers or something like that to talk about your projects and your learnings, because sometimes they experience or have opinions about different things. Those are
Sometimes they have opinions.
Yeah, it's really funny. Just as an off topic here, in our chat the other day, we were talking about Delta versus United versus American Airlines, and one of our friends had mentioned that he was flying Delta and had a bad experience. And then I saw Adam start to type, and I'm like, "Oh, here we go! Here comes the dissertation on Delta." Yeah, if you listen to the show, Adam has a lot of opinions, and he likes to make those known. But it's
Guilty.
okay. Yeah.
Actually, I was mostly agreeing with what he said.
Oh, yeah, you were. So anyways, this was a list of stuff. I don't have any specific, podcasts or blogs that I feel like you should go and listen to, or people on Twitter. But as you get into that, there's going to be ones that you learn that you want to follow that have good things to say and things to learn. Hopefully that was some good information for you guys when it comes to training. This was my comprehensive list of things that I've done throughout my career, and maybe you've learned something that you didn't know before. So that's our show for this week. Thanks for watching and listening as always. Our information will be in the show notes if you have any questions or topics you want us to talk about in the future. Thanks. We'll talk to you guys next week.
Thank you for listening to the Blue Security Podcast. Please check out the show notes, catch up on episodes you may have missed, and subscribe so you don't miss any future episodes. Find Andy on Twitter @AJaw0 and Adam @AJ Brewer. See you at our next episode.